Hi, I'm Nikki, the Obsessive Bookseller. Welcome to my channel. Today we're doing a wrap-up for January and a TBR for February 24. I've hit the ground running in January. I've finished a lot of titles, but at the same time, I'm also really stressed about a whole bunch of commitments that I've signed myself up for that I know I don't have enough time to fit in. Like, what am I doing to myself? Like, current me has no problem throwing future me under the bus when it comes to signing up for things. Like, oh, sure, yeah, I have plenty of time. Not least of which, a couple of challenges that I'm running, one specifically with my patrons that I'm really enjoying doing. But yeah, between that and Read, Burn, Hoard and all of these other things that I've got going on, I'm feeling a little stretched for time. So perhaps fitting that I started out the month finishing Getting Things Done by David Allen. It's a nonfiction. I've read it before. One of my all-time favorites. I really love his process. And I needed a refresher because I had forgotten a few of the details. And what I picked up most from this time around reading is that my brain just can't possibly hold everything. So I needed a better capturing system. And most importantly, I needed to review it on a regular basis so that I don't forget things. So what have I been doing? I've been reviewing all of my reading plans and changing it constantly what I'm going to pick up next. But in past wrap-ups, I've mentioned that I'm in the middle of like 7 books, 12 books, 20 books. I always have multiple books going at once. Right now, I am reading 2. I'm only reading 2 books. It's a new thing I'm trying. We'll see if it helps alleviate some of the stress I've got around it. Reading should not be stressful. Somehow this is where we're at. I also finished for Patreon Book Club. We read 16 Ways to Defend a Walled City, book 1 in the Siege trilogy by KJ Parker. And I'm a fangirl. I just recorded my review for this one and I was gushing about it. I'm like, wow, I like this book a lot more than I even thought I would. It is this cool mix of like an Abercrombie writing style meets a little bit of Pratchett levity. 2 authors who honestly kind of have similar vibes, although Abercrombie's a bit darker, but this was like the perfect marriage of those two. It wasn't over the top to the point where it was stupid. It made me laugh out loud several times. The creativity of the narrative is just so much fun. Very unconventional. The main character is a hoot. He's not trying to be a hoot. He thinks he's pretty clever, but yeah, everything about this book just worked for me. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I can't wait to read the next one. Full review to come. My patrons and I also read The Master of Jinn by P. Djeli Clark. I liked this one more than I thought I would, but there are some things that I wish were a little bit different in the book. I really loved the side characters. There were 2 in particular that like they were kind of, one of them was especially minor, but I thought they kind of stole the show. The Jinn were cool. I'm not as sold on this Jinn story as I was with the Bartimaeus series. I really loved Bartimaeus, the creativity. Those were kind of bestial Jinn. Humanoid in a way, but these ones were very humanoid Jinn. And they did have some good moments. The atmosphere was set really well right from the beginning. I thought it was a really good introduction to a story. The thing I didn't care for too much was the mystery, but at least for what it was entertaining throughout the whole book. And like, I was throwing out theories here and there, which anytime a book can get me engaged enough to actually start making predictions, then yeah, it's pretty good. And I kind of also liked like the moral of the story. It wasn't heavy-handed by any means, but yeah, I came away feeling glad that I had read it. But I'm not sure if I'm going to read anything else in the world. I finished Star Wars, Heir to the Empire, book 1 in the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn. And if you have any complaints about what Disney has done with the Star Wars universe, pick this series up and pretend the Disney thing didn't even exist. Like, this was canon for a really long time until Disney decided it wanted to make more money off of it and just arbitrarily declared that this is no longer canon. It's a very personal decision. You can decide what's canon for you and what's not. For me personally, this is the real deal. I enjoyed this thoroughly. I even listened to an audio version and it has the music and it has like sound effects during the fight scenes and Chewie sounds like Chewie. Like, the voices were so good. Han Solo, it sounds like you're listening to Harrison Ford at points. Like, it was so good. I can't wait to read on. I never thought I would read Star Wars books. There are so many of them and I'm like, am I really going to commit that much time to it? But yes, I am. This is the tip of the iceberg. I also finished The Silver Blood Promise by James Logan. It's book 1 in the Last Legacy series. Comes out sometime in the summer this year. I really wish I had enjoyed this book more. I'm going to do a full review on it for the publisher, but the beginning was so promising. There were a lot of things I really loved about it, and then it turned into really a struggle for me to finish. There was I had maybe like 30 pages to go. I sat on those 30 pages for almost the entire month and finally forced myself to finish the book. There were just enough little things that weren't working for me that kind of added up into this like rant. And I feel so bad because debut authors, they work so hard to get their books published, and they don't need me bad-mouthing them on the internet. I'll go into finer details later, but for the time being, I'm between a 2 and a 3 star at the end of it. It had potential, but it didn't quite get there for me. I read 4,000 Weeks by Birkwood. I don't know, I picked it up on a whim after a conversation with a friend about how like time is finite, and I have a tendency to work through all of my to-do lists as fast as possible with the idea that once I finish all of those to-do lists, then I can finally work on the things that really bring me true value and meaning in life. But see, the thing is to-do lists, they perpetuate themselves. So no matter how hard you work or how many things you get done, there will always be more things on that list. And this book celebrates giving into it, surrendering to the fact that you are not ever going to be able to get everything done. So you're better off kind of focusing on 1 or 2 things that really bring you joy and learning to live with the anxiety of all the things that you're not doing. I loved this book. I devoured it in like a day, and I'm going to apply it to my reading life. I've got a video kind of illustrating how I'm taking self-help books and applying them to reading. I think it should be fun. In any case, I really enjoyed that one. Highly recommend it. It was less about like the how-tos, like the nitty-gritty of a system, and more like just a philosophy and appreciating what this author is trying to say. I liked it. I also finished volume 1 of Tales of the Apt by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is short stories set in the Apt world, his longest fantasy series, and I really like these short stories. I think they added a whole lot to the picture. There were some minor characters in the main series that kind of got like a highlighted moment here. The only thing is like it kind of, they tell you can read these before Empire and Black and Gold, like it's kind of like a prequel set, but a lot of it is kind of giving a little bit of foreshadowing for things that are coming in books that I haven't even gotten to yet. I'm on book 5, and I don't know. I kind of wish I had finished the entire series first. I think the tiniest things are spoilers, so for me it kind of wrecked a few things because I'm really good at putting things together. So I'm like, oh, well, obviously this happens to that character if that's how he said that. Don't read the author's notes, I guess, but it was a really good collection of short stories. He got more creative with it. There were more varieties of bugs in this than I've read so far in the main series, so yeah, I liked that aspect. I would very highly recommend the series as a whole, but this one, the jury's still out on whether or not I think it wrecks future books. I'll have to see when I get there. And finally, I finished The Time of Blood by John Gwynne. My patron Katie and I are reading this series together, and I like this one a lot better than the first book. Possibly because I'm only reading one book at a time, and so I was able to fully dive in, whereas the first book I read like a chapter here, a chapter there. I drug it out over the course of a whole month, and maybe it took away from my enjoyment a little bit. It's not going in the direction that I thought it would. It's got the same amount of brutality as the initial 4 books, but it's not as complex. It's focusing a little bit on younger characters. I'm finding the conflict, like the basis behind the entire conflict of the series, a little bit hard to swallow. It's my personal trigger on some of them, and so it's not necessarily an enjoyable read for me. But even aside from that, if it weren't for the brutality, I would say this one was written for a slightly younger audience. Hardcore brutal in places, so perhaps not. But I like the characters. The overall arc of the series may not be as complex as I initially thought it would be, but that's not a bad thing. But I am looking forward to the final book in the series. This one offered a few really interesting additions, if you will, that I think will be fun to see how it impacts the rest of the story. Now we get into the currently reading. In days past, this has been the longest section of this type of format of video production, but today I only have 2 things. In December, with my patrons, I started God Emperor of Dune by Frank Herbert. This is book 4 in the Dune series, and I got so behind on buddy reads that this was the sacrifice. I set this one down. I keep meaning to get back to it, but I wanted to be on time for all of the other reads that we were doing. So there's a really dry part in the middle of this book that feels like it goes on forever. It's just a lot of talk, a lot of conjecture. I kind of felt the same way about Dune Messiah. There's a lot of elements of that in there where it didn't feel like it was really progressing the story forward. But it is interesting. I want to know more about what's going on, but I haven't been able to make time to just sit with it. I think I've got 8 hours left on the audiobook. I think the thing I'm liking most about it is its addition to the Dune series as a whole, the way it's changing things and kind of rounding the world out, adding to it, moving things forward. There's a lot of stuff, like implications going on here that you're learning about. And so, yeah, I'm still committed to the series, but I mean, it's probably going to take me another 2 months to wrap this one up at the rate I'm going. I'm also finally reading Demons of Good and Evil. I decided to start this one yesterday. It's not the one I had planned, but it's the one I wanted to read the most. And so I'm going to try to start picking up the ones that I want to read the most more often. It feels like riding a bike, like picking up right where we left off. I really love this author. I love what she's doing with the series. It has not gotten old. This is book like 15 or 16, and it doesn't feel stale at this point. There was like a revamp. The series ended and she continued on, and I'm just finding it highly interesting. So only a couple of chapters into that one, but already like super excited. Now getting into the TBR for the month. February 9th, my patrons and I are reading Lock In by John Scalzi. I've read a lot of John Scalzi at this point, and I've enjoyed every single one of them, so I'm hoping this one, follows suit. I've deliberately not looked at anything about what it's about. I just know I like the man's writing style and his humor, so I will probably like it, whatever it is. Fingers crossed. We're also planning to read Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. Of all the Naomi Novik books, this is the only one that I really wasn't that interested in diving into. But it's funny, I've enjoyed almost every single thing I've read by the woman. I love the way she tells stories, I love her writing style, and she's got like always a fun factor to things. His Majesty's Dragon easily makes like one of my top all-time favorite books list, and I loved the Scholomance duology. Not the third book, but the first two. I thought those were awesome. And I even really liked Uprooted. So I've heard a lot of things about this book from people in the comments just saying that it was a fun read. They really enjoyed it. So I'm hoping I do as well. I'm glad for my patrons because I probably wouldn't have picked it up for a long time otherwise. We're probably looking to finish the Blood and Bone series this month. A Time of Courage is the final book. It's like twice as big as the second book. So hopefully there's a lot of action in here. I mean, it's a Gwyn book. There's going to be a ton of really good fight scenes. So I'm expecting to end on a bang. And then for Patreon Book Club, we're picking up Uncanny Collateral by Brian McClellan. This is a novella. We figured short month, short book. There are only 2 such novellas out. I've been sitting on audiobooks since a random sale a few years ago, and he's one of my top authors. I loved Powder Mage, especially that second trilogy. And so we'll see what he can do with some short stories. I don't know what they're about, but I figured they'd be fun, so I'm looking forward to that. And that's pretty much it. I've left a few slots open for a couple of the projects that I'm doing. You guys are seeing the incomplete series running on the main channel, but for my patrons, I'm filming the next quarter's challenges. And it's a fun one, but it's a time-consuming one, so I've got to leave some slots for that. I'm also trying to read for Read Burn Horde, and then I keep signing up for ARC releases with the publisher, which is so dumb because I know I'm not going to have time to read them. So I'm in a stress and I'm going to get to the point where I have to throw everything out the window and just focus on those because I signed up for it and I committed it and it's an obligation read, and then I'm going to pick it up and not enjoy it as much as I would have had I read it on my own time frame. But I keep signing up for them because they're shiny and pretty. Anyway, let me know what you read in January, anything really good, and also what your reading plans are for February. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you on the next one.